Yes, hello, and good afternoon here from Singapore. Let me just open my presentation. So, my topic is big thinking with big data, and I'm going to speak about AI and how AI can influence glaucoma management in the future from a slightly larger perspective than we have done so far. So what does actually big data mean? Uh, well, big data in healthcare is a term used to describe massive volumes of information created by the adoption of digital technologies that collect patients' records and help in managing hospital performance, otherwise too large and complex for traditional technologies. So you see, this definition of big data in healthcare is broader than what we have talked about so far. We have mainly talked about imaging data, we have talked about tonometry, we have talked about visual fields, but this is a very broad approach, and you will see that potentially we can digitally record a lot of data in order to help management of glaucoma patients. So what is actually the source of this? How can we get such big data? Well, there is multiple opportunities, and this depends also from country to country. It depends on the healthcare system in general, but it also depends on the insurance portals. So, of course, we can get data from patient portals. We can get data from research studies, and this is mostly what has been talked about today, that we do a study, we collect data from glaucoma patients, and then we use them for AI solutions. Potentially, and this has also been mentioned today, we can obtain data from electronic health records, but in the future, we can also maybe obtain data from wearable devices. I will show you examples today that potentially we can also obtain data from search engines, from generic databases, from government agencies, from payer records, and from staffing schedules. So in principle, there is a very broad availability of such data, and it really depends on the setting whether we are able to use this data or not. Now, what can we gain from big data? Well, the first thing is we can potentially obtain disease prevention. I think this is something that is not easy in glaucoma. The reason is simply that we are not quite sure when the disease actually starts. We don't have a good point, as with most neurodegenerative diseases, where we say this is the point when glaucoma actually starts. What is, however, feasible is, of course, early detection of the disease. And as you know, since glaucoma can be treated pretty well, and in the majority of cases, this is an important goal, then we can look into personalized treatment. And both of these factors can be associated with reduced healthcare costs. And at the end of the day, we would also like to reduce the burden of patients' visits. So what does this actually mean? It means that maybe in some patients that are stable over a longer period of time, the number of patients' visits can be reduced. Now, let's talk about early detection of the disease. And I know that my colleague, Professor Jingyu Cheng, has already talked about potential for screening of the disease. But it is important to understand that glaucoma is a very good disease for early detection or for screening. And there is a number of criteria that are well established that need to be fulfilled in order to qualify a disease as potentially useful for screening. And this is, on the one hand, it needs to be a significant burden. Yes, without any doubt, glaucoma is a significant burden. And since the disease potentially leads to blindness, there is no doubts about this. Then there needs to be a detectable stage of the disease. Yes, we can do this very well with both with imaging and with perimetry. So both structural and functional assessments are there to detect the stage of the disease. And accordingly, we also have a good understanding of the natural history of the disease. Many large-scale clinical trials have been performed where we now understand very well what is the average loss of visual function in glaucoma per year. And it is very well understood what are the stages and what is the natural history of the disease. Now, the question whether an appropriate test is available is a complicated one, and I'm not going to talk about this in details because this actually Jingyu has done. But I put here a minus because at the moment, screening is not performed. But this is also to a large degree related to the fact that we don't really have facilities for screening. So Jingyu talked about the diabetes screening program that we have in Singapore, and this is maybe one of the ways to go, or even to expand such screening, to expand such screening opportunities. And then the appropriate test is most likely an imaging test. Then another very important consideration is whether early detection has an outcome benefit. Yes, definitely it has an outcome benefit because you can treat glaucoma and you can initiate treatment as soon as the disease is diagnosed. And we know that this will reduce the incidence of blindness. Please be aware that this is a major difference to many other neurodegenerative diseases. For instance, in Alzheimer's disease, even if we can detect the disease very early, we have limited effective treatments available. And this is another very important prerequisite for doing screening. The political willingness to support such a program is at the moment limited, and this is basically because there is no appropriate test available that really has high enough sensitivity and specificity to do so. But again, Jingyu Cheng has tackled about this. Now, when we talk about early detection or screening of the disease, usually we talk about imaging. And imaging has a number of advantages. On the one hand, images is very well suited for AI solutions, but imaging can also be used to detect multiple disease. As you know, fundus photography or OCT can not only be used to detect glaucoma, but they can also be used to detect retinal disease, such as diabetic retinopathy or age-related macular degeneration, which are the most frequent diseases, but maybe also including other rarer diseases. And this is actually the biggest advantage of imaging, that potentially we can screen for many different eye diseases. And that's the reason why most programs work with this approach. Now let's talk about personalized treatment. Personalized treatment is very important. We have already heard today about the concept of target pressure. And this target pressure is, of course, aimed at a level where beyond this, there is no progression anymore. But the detection of progression is very, very difficult in glaucoma. And it is particularly difficult because the visual field is fluctuating. And the larger this fluctuation over time in a single patient, the more difficult it is to actually detect progression. And usually it takes a lot of visual field exams to really confirm progression. But this is extremely important because the progression analysis is usually the basis for a change in treatment. Now, one of the very intensive areas is if we can, for instance, use imaging in order to improve our abilities to detect progression. And there are several ways how to look into this problem. And this is an interesting model to have a visual field block one that contains of three visual fields, and then you have a surveillance and a confirmatory period, and via these first through visual fields as a matrix, it is possible to better predict the decline of visual field over time. And this is, as I said, an approach how to implement imaging into this, and this is actually imaging of optic disc photography and OCT imaging. And you can see if you add this in, you can to a certain degree predict the visual field and the visual field progression in such patients. So this is an area of very intensive research. How can we actually combine multimodal imaging technologies, but also maybe clinical data in order to have a better prediction of future decline in visual fields? And this is, of course, the key issue to have optimized, personalized treatment. And this is something that shows again that this is possible. This is several machine learning approaches how to do structure function modeling in glaucoma. And you see that one of the problems here is, of course, this well-known floor effect, where you can see that this is improved by certain deep learning approaches, but not fully overcome yet. And it is very clear that for such approaches, you see, unfortunately, the number of patient data here is relatively small. But in order to get an improved prediction of the visual field from imaging data, it is definitely necessary to have large data sets. Now, what can we do with this personalized treatment? Well, we can use AI to identify certain patients' characteristics. One is, of course, the identification of likely non-responders. You all know that nowadays prostaglandin analogs are the mainstay of glaucoma therapy, but there is some patients that do not respond to these types of drugs. And AI can in the future potentially tell us what are the factors that are associated with this lack of response. Then there is relevant comorbidities. We have some ideas about comorbidities and the progression of the disease, such as the ones related, for instance, to blood pressure. But we have a limited understanding of this, and AI can help us to identify such comorbidities. We can have predictive analysis tools, and I've talked a little bit about this already. And then we can also look into more details into contraindications for drugs, for instance, for beta receptor antagonists, and AI can tell us more about this. But interestingly, AI could potentially also be used by identification of likely non-adherence to the medication. You know that there are certain subjects that are prescribed glaucoma drugs, but they never use the drug and have non-adherence, and hence the intraocular pressure stays high and the patient progresses. And AI can also help us based on the personality of a patient to identify whether these patients will likely be non-adherent. And we can, of course, also use AI to enhance patients' engagement. Now, very important in this respect is also telemedicine, and we can get data from telemedicine now in many different ways. Here I've just shown some devices that can do home monitoring for intraocular pressure, or that can use visual field tests at home, either glass-based or screen-based, or also there is prototypes for portable OCTs that can potentially be used for home monitoring. And I think when all these data come in, and let's say a patient does this, does all this IOP measurement daily, and maybe the structural and functional assessment on a monthly basis, this will definitely improve our abilities to detect progression. Now, this telemedicine could also reduce the number of patient visits, because obviously, if the patient has controlled intraocular pressure and the structure and function is stable, then there is no need for the patient to come back to the outpatient clinic. And it can also be an opportunity, you know, that many patients go from one doctor to the other because they want to hear a second opinion. But when they do this type of home monitoring and they share this via their electronic health records, this could save a lot of money, but also a lot of trouble for the patients. Now, let me at the end talk about something else. We are thinking about big data, mainly about management of glaucoma, but there is other opportunities where we still need to fully understand how we can use this. And one is, for instance, we can use AI to improve the workflow. As you know, in each clinic, in each outpatient clinic, there is a certain workflow for a patient, where first the data are keyed in, and then the patient maybe goes for visual field and for imaging, and is then seen at the slit lamp of a doctor. And analyzing very carefully this workflow is seeing where the bottlenecks is a very important way of improving glaucoma care. And this also relates to improved supply chain management. But we can also use patients' predictions for improved staffing. And finally, and this is something that will become very important for the future, we can also, AI can also support architects for planning new hospitals. So in a new hospital, you know, we have the rooms that are dedicated to imaging, we have the rooms that are dedicated to functional, we have the rooms that are dedicated to slit lamp examinations. And the architects, based on AI and then the better understood workflow, can also design the rooms in a way that there is an optimized workflow for this. And interestingly, and there is already, not in ophthalmology, but in other areas, there is already ways to look into Google Maps and see how actually patients travel from home to the hospital, and also see what is a good way if a new hospital is established, where should this hospital be located within the city, and how should the access be regulated. And with this, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I would like to thank the organizers once again for inviting me to speak here.